Hi there, it's Denise Eckert, and I love coming on here and sharing different ideas and techniques to help you lower the stress in your life. And we are on our cell phones all the time. And today I've got a special guest, MJ Murray Vachon, and she's an LCSW and business owner with more than 48,000 hours of therapy sessions and 31 years of teaching her mental wellness program, Inner Challenge, in schools, community groups, and Notre Dame football. Now, MJ, how did you get inspired to do this kind of work?
That's a great question. And I love the word
48,000 hours of it.
hours. Yes, that's true. I think that there were two factors. When I was a teenager, it was in early 1970s, mid 1970s. I had a number of friends that fell off the path. And I remember blow drying my hair and thinking, I'm going to spend my life trying to understand what happened to them. But then I just went on and became an adolescent and did that. But in college, I got introduced to the field of counseling and mental health and went on to get a degree in become a licensed clinical social worker. And for 10 years, I worked in the area of physical and sexual abuse. And I was trained as a family systems therapist. And it was that training as a systems therapist where I'm working with a client or a couple or a family, and I'm really learning and becoming aware that, oh, it isn't just what happens in the office. There's all these systems outside of them that impact their wellness. And that made me have this thought one day. It seems like the only people who have this information are therapists, psychologists that help keep people healthy. So in the early 1990s, long before social emotional learning, before even the term emotional intelligence was coined, a colleague and I created a program called Inner Challenge that, as you said, has been in schools. I've done it with businesses. And so I have been fortunate to come to this issue today, which I think of as how do we outsmart our smartphones with two hats? That as a clinical social worker and that as a mental wellness educator. Because I think the only way we can outsmart them is to integrate the knowledge from both of the fields that I've been in.
Absolutely. So now, how do our cell phones create stress or anxiety?
Can I give a clinical example?
Absolutely.
Okay. We all know they do it, but I've had probably 50 clients in the last 12 years that fall into this little boat. And I had someone earlier in the year. She called, former client. I'd seen her in her early 20s, and she said, I think I'm anxious and depressed. So I sent her the screenings that we use for anxiety and depression, and she was right. She came back as moderately high in both anxiety and depression. She came to her appointment, and what I noticed initially was this was a young woman when I saw her 15 years ago that was a bright light. And it looked like somebody had just dimmed her. I also noticed that she had gained a significant amount of weight. She came in and I said, tell me your story, update me on your life. She'd gotten a new job 18 months before. And she said, I think I know why I'm depressed. I'm in sales. I love this job. I work on commission. This is a field that has downturns, and I'm in my first downturn. Okay. When we don't feel well, we all create an idea of why it is. I said, oh, so that makes sense. You're probably a little worried and anxious, you know, about not having money. And she looked at me, she goes, oh, no, not at all. Because this company I work for is so awesome. They taught me to always bank part of my paycheck. So I thought I would feel so happy, but actually I don't. And what I've learned as a clinician is we check out the story, which much of the time is right, but in this case was wrong. And then I moved to the mental wellness hat that I wear. And I said, let's look at your sleep. How is it? She said, not good. We looked on her phone where she had a sleep tracker, just under 6 hours a night. And so that's helpful. You're doing 1 hour and a half short. That means you're really doing one all nighter a night, and you are not a college student. And then I said, let's look at your phone use. And she's, oh, I said, before you do that, I want you to guess how many hours do you think you're on your phone? Just in the last 2 weeks. She goes, because I'm not working. I want to say 4, but it's probably 6. Make a long story short, it was between 9 and 10. She's like, I'm so embarrassed. She literally took her phone. She's, I'm so embarrassed. And I said, don't be embarrassed. Do you know the science of the cell phone? And she said, not really. I've heard a little bit about it. And I'm going to come back to that because what's important for our conversation today is I worked with her to create a plan to get her cell phone use below 2 hours. She came back in 2 weeks, like the other 50 people. The depression was gone. The sleep was better, very low anxiety. And this is the first thing I want people to understand. Overuse of the cell phone will eventually lead to symptoms of depression and anxiety. Now, with that being said, it doesn't mean that the cell phone is the only reason that people have that. But even if you have other reasons, organic reasons or situational reasons that cause those, overuse of the cell phone will worsen that. The science of the cell phone, which is really the question you asked me,
I can't wait to hear this.
is four things. And I couldn't wait to hear it either. I have a podcast, and I learned this from a college neuroscience major who came on my podcast to work on her overuse of the cell phone. And in that episode, which I've given you the link, she taught me the science of the cell phone. And it's very easy. If we understand that when Silicon Valley created the cell phone, they had all the neuroscience information. And what they knew is that the brain has a reward system. And as humans, we love rewards. And when they designed the phone, they designed the phone to perfectly sync up to the reward system in the brain to simplify it. Obviously, if someone who's in neuroscience could add much more information, is that dopamine is a neurochemical that gives us pleasure. And that is hooked up to our reward system. And the brain is an organ that's adapted and evolved slowly over time. Prior to the phone, the dopamine system would give us hits of pleasure if we were out walking in the woods, if we got a hug, if our team won. But the phone is designed to give us rapid and intense hits of dopamine. And it takes the dopamine system and it depletes it, which is why we get irritable or depressed with overuse. I think the best example is when you try to pull a 9-year-old off a game and they've been doing it for 2 hours. They often will melt down because their dopamine system has been dysregulated. The second point I want to make is that our brain adapts, and that when we've overused the dopamine system, the dopamine receptors become less receptive. And what does that mean? We need more pleasure to feel pleasure. Most people, if they think about it, can relate to, boy, I used to take a bike ride and feel really good after. I used to walk in the woods, but it's a little flat now. And that's because the phone is actually retraining our dopamine system. And we need more pleasure to feel pleasurable. And what happens then is we keep going back because I know I can feel better. So that way it's like a drug. People use a drug for the first time and they have an intense feeling of pleasure and they want more of that. But their brain adapts and they build up tolerance and they need more in order to have that same sense of pleasure, which is part of the reason that we keep scrolling and scrolling just one more time. And it's also designed, as I think people know, this little phone is a business and it is designed to keep us on it. It is not designed to keep the world connected and loving and all the things that we hope.
This is going to come down to turnout.
Sorry.
In the 50-50 election. And just
Speaking of how
Well,
inappropriate they are, I don't even know how to. I'm so sorry about that.
That's okay.
Election day, just to demonstrate, right?
You didn't
Just to
even turn it
demonstrate.
on, and here it is.
Here it is. That's right. That's right. And so
Not
but
information that you wanted right at this moment, but it felt that you needed to hear that.
it felt that I needed. And that doesn't even get
That's
into the
scary.
intrusion. It is scary. But I think we have to be like brutally honest. This is a business.
Yeah.
And for most people, the phone is leading us. And the last part of the science is that we can be on the phone and we're engaged and we're getting hits of dopamine and we can feel like, oh, I'm really doing something. And then we get off and we're a little flat because it's all passive. This isn't like taking a walk in the woods. This isn't going and having coffee with your friend where you're talking back and forth. This is really passive. And it really stops us from having a sense of, I feel good when I do this activity out of work, because we're not creating anything. We're just in response mode the whole time. And so those are really the four pieces of the phone. It dysregulates our dopamine, our brain adapts, so we need more. And we aren't really getting a sense of creating and doing. We're getting a sense of just being passive. Some of it is fine. Overuse, as my client learned, really makes us feel crummy.
You're eliminating our senses. Like you're watching it, but you're not feeling it, you're not touching it, and you're making yourself feel numb, really.
Yes. And that's a beautiful point, because the numbness comes with the overuse of the dopamine system, where all the dopamine gets dumped out. And I didn't say this, so I'm glad you are giving me this chance. The dopamine system can't replenish our dopamine as quickly as the phone dumps it out. So the numbness is one of the consequences.
Yeah. Now, for someone that's listening and is going, oh my, I spent too much time on my phone, what are some of the steps that we can take to change that in our lives?
The first is stay with your oh my, with no judgment, that this caught us off guard. I don't believe that they really even understood the consequences. And I was in Spain 2 years ago, and I noticed that everyone in Spain looked a little brighter, as my mother would say, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Nobody in the airport was on their phone. People at the cafes weren't on their phone. And I asked a taxi driver, and he said, oh, we don't have unlimited minutes. Wow. I was just in Scotland and Italy, exact same. They do not have unlimited minutes. People are not scrolling this on the sidewalk. So when you ask about what can we do, this has all been trial and error. I've been working on this for 12 years, because I can't even assess someone for anxiety and depression anymore without figuring out sleep and phone, because I will get an assessment that's not valid. And so what I have done, and in all honesty, this has been in collaboration with my clients as we've tested, is I use the term we each have to create an infrastructure to manage our phone. And I use the word infrastructure because we're familiar with it because of roads and bridges. And all infrastructures work around the geography in which they're being built. And each person has to create an infrastructure that works around the geography of their life and their family. And my infrastructure won't look like yours, and yours won't look like your neighbors. But nonetheless, we are not Spaniards. We have unlimited minutes. And if we don't do it, the science of the phone will outsmart us, and the phone will manage us instead of us managing our phone. So I have 3 steps, and it's the acronym ACT. A, the first one is awareness. You must be aware of the science of the phone, and you must really understand it in a super basic level, that you are not stronger than the science of the phone. The second awareness is self-awareness. You have to, in creating the infrastructure that is going to work for you, you have to answer one simple question. Am I a person who's highly disciplined, or am I a person who discipline is hard? This is not a moral judgment, because I've worked with enough people who weren't disciplined to know that was also their superpower. But when it comes to managing the phone, that will be really important in step 2, C, which is create and curate. You have to create phone-free time. And again, that's different. But my experience is, if people do not get very specific as an individual who lives by themselves, as a family member, and I think this is true for offices. I work a lot with managers. I have a coaching practice that often a lot of it is with high-level managers, that if we are not very specific as to when there's phone-free time, it will not happen. And it really needs to be seen in a system kind of way. Family meetings, an individual who really decides upon it. You look at your day. I have a lot of clients who they finish their workday, Their family has decided their phone-free time is for 2.5 hours when everybody gets home. They leave their phone in the car. The kids put their phone in a box. And this is where disciplined or not disciplined. If you're a highly disciplined person and you can put it in your drawer and not check it for 2.5 hours, awesome. But if you're not, then leave it in your car, buy a lockbox. And I have a lot of families who thought they were disciplined until they learned, nope, not disciplined. No shame. This is powerful. One of the things I learned when I worked with Notre Dame football is that it's always downloading, and the electronic frequencies signals our brain. I used to think, oh, I'm so close with my children. When they call me on the cell phone, I pick it up and it's them. No, it's actually the phone is signaling to me that someone is calling me. And that's why for many people, they just can't say, I'll keep it in the drawer for 2 hours. So C is be able to create phone-free time, and then to curate, to really understand what you're looking at on your phone. What you're looking at on your phone goes into your mind. And one of the things my clients have really appreciated is just the frame of, I have to curate my phone. Do I really want to be on TikTok and looking at people who are picking their skin? A lot of time is spent doing that, or other obscure things that one would never waste their time doing. That's passive. It's very passive. So the second one is to be able to curate. So the C is really to create phone-free time, and then to really curate and understand that whatever you look at, the algorithm is going to give you more of. And you can't outsmart the algorithm. So don't spend your time looking at stuff that isn't life-giving or life-sucking. That's what I ask people. Is this life-giving or is this life-sucking? And the phone has a lot of life-sucking stuff on it. And for our mental health, for our physical wellness, we want to be seeing things as fun and educational, that's life-giving. The T is take it out of your bedroom. And the T is take it out of your bedroom. And this is obvious. I think that we've gotten this information to the general public that the phone shouldn't be in the bedroom. And it should be the easiest of the infrastructure, but often for people, it's really the hardest. People always have resistance. They're like, oh, it's my alarm. And then I always show them this little alarm clock. You can get this at a thrift store for 50 cents. And before 2007, everybody had alarm clocks. But just to be really clear about our willpower, if you slept with a big bowl of M&Ms and never ate them, that would be unbelievable. And the phone is just like a big bowl of candy. And it needs to be outside of your bedroom because it's downloading all night. And there's a difference. I actually had a client today who has a hard time sleeping, and he sleeps on his couch. And I said, are you comfortable sleeping on your couch? He goes, actually, I sleep on my couch and my phone is in my bedroom. And I have to get up to turn off the alarm. And that keeps me from going back to bed. Good. And I think we just have to understand that it needs to be out of our room. People can have it in their hallway. So if they get an emergency call from an elderly parent or a teenager, they have access to it. But it's really important that we don't have it at night because the temptation is just too strong. And you wake up in the middle of the night. If you're a menopausal woman, you're going to wake up in the middle of the night and you're going to start scrolling. And then you're going to be stimulating your brain, and it'll make it harder for you to go back to sleep. So the acronym is awareness, create phone-free time, curate what you look at, and take it out of your bedroom. I've had a lot of success with clients, and it really is because they move from that place of, oh yeah, the phone, where we act powerless, to a place of power and say, I'm really going to act. I'm going to do this.
I love that. That's amazing. And I do have a lot of friends where I've said, get the phone out of your room. And they're like, oh, I got kids or I got this. But you know what? I played with my phone. And even though my phone never comes into my bedroom, you can put it on Do Not Disturb. And if someone phones you repeatedly, it will put the call through. And that's all you need. If someone
Yes.
is an emergency and does need to call you, just keep calling me and I will hear it, because I don't sleep with my phone. And this one friend of mine, she has such horrible sleeping habits and she's always tired, but she hears every email, every text,
Yes.
everything. So you're constantly being interrupted. It's just crazy. We have this horrible, like a pattern interrupter,
Yes.
and we're trying to sleep.
Yes. That right now they call it the attention economy. That much of our economy is built on trying to get our attention.
Mm,
And it really is so much better if we understand that we have the right to put our attention where it goes. That just because I'm getting some notification when it's convenient for them to do it, that doesn't mean I have to hear their notification. So I really encourage people, all notifications off, all buzzers off, because in reality, it's good for everyone. That if there's an emergency, my hunch is that most people will find out because your phone still is close. But if we see how addictive they are, and that's not just some loose word, they are addicting. If we understand that and we treat them similar to cocaine,
mhm.
then we understand when someone says you should have the phone out of your bedroom and you have all these excuses. It's just like the drug addict who says, as soon as New Year's is over, I'm going to be done. Or my job is so stressful. It's the only way I can work 18-hour days. That we really are pretty educated in the excuses when it comes to drugs and alcohol. We need to be equally educated, not in a harsh way, but just this is humans. We like the easy way. We like the passive way. And we now have a lifestyle for one of the first times in a long time where it is just normal to be incredibly unhealthy. And then we get surprised when you're anxious and depressed and you have to go to a therapist to find out, oh, you're actually fine. Your phone, this lifestyle tool, was overused and it made you sick.
Yeah, absolutely. They want to talk about the use of earbuds.
Yes. I try to use them as little as I can. Now, I am a therapist. I do some online therapy. I do a lot of online coaching. So I need for privacy to have them in. I actually look at to make sure that the phone will tell you, you can go to audio, it'll tell you how much you're using, if you're using it the right sound. But one of the things that I think is really important when it comes to relationship, because we haven't even touched on that. I've looked at this really to what it does to the person. But again, looking at the system, the phone is having a huge impact on relationships. Some good. I can FaceTime my grandson who lives in Atlanta. That is fantastic. He knows me. But we also talk a lot about having conversations or texts or conflicts over the phone. And one of the things that happens, because I work a lot with people who are trying to figure out parenting teenagers or adult children, is that they'll have these really high conflict or intense conversations. Not that they're always having conflict with each other, but the child calls home from college and is so distraught. And people put their earphones in and they're dusting or whatever while they're listening to their child. The problem with that is it it creates a distance that isn't healthy. And you begin to hear it differently because the earbuds actually take out some of the emotional connection. So I really encourage parents and if you're a boss and you have a hard conversation, do it face to face. Ask people if privacy is not an issue to take the earbuds out, because that's more of the natural back and forth where you're hearing their voice through your ears, not through a speaker. And it really lowers the intensity. I've had so many people who I've said, just run the experiment. This is just information I have, but you get to run your own experiment. You go home, try the next time your kid calls you because they're so upset with something that happened at work. Sit down, put the phone on speaker, and listen. Two things will happen. You'll feel it differently, and you'll be able to regulate yourself differently. Secondly, if you're multitasking, you're often more willing to stay on those distress calls longer. And I live by the rule of one. People, they need to dump their stuff. But once they dump it once, it's helpful to stop and say, this is what I hear you saying. Is there anything you haven't said? Wow, that sounds really hard. Do you think it's really helpful to keep going on and on? And one of the unintended consequences of running this experiment with many clients is they'd come back and said, wow, when I sat in a chair, put it on speaker, like we used to when we listened to people before all these devices, I have a better read on what's happening, but I also don't let it go on as long. And that's really helpful for everyone.
That's so powerful, because that is, we're listening, but we're not, because we're distracted.
Yes.
And we're
So the
not really
person doesn't
listening.
get, we're not really listening. And that means that the person is just going on and on. And that's part of the consequence of the phone. Is there's a book called Alone Together. And there's a lot of times that people are using the phone, and I run this experiment on one of the social media platforms. People will throw out a question about parenting. And a couple times a week, I'll sit down and I'll read the responses, and often they're very good and they're helpful. But I think all the time, like, wow, that is like throwing it out there with getting nothing back. That's like on both sides, which is really different than calling your friend and saying, sometimes I look at the work conflicts, like saying to your friend, I'm really struggling with my manager, and having a coffee and really working it out. And so it's not just affecting our own wellness individually, it's also affecting our relational wellness, where we think we're in relationship with people online, but it's a very limited relationship. I think people, when we talk about how loneliness has increased, of course, that's a consequence of all the devices, where we really do feel like we're doing something, but we're actually passively participating, which is so different than really sitting with someone and being there for them when they're going through a hard time, or the opposite, being there for them when everything's great.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like we're creating these superficial relationships. It's scary. It really is. This was an amazing episode. We're going to be wrapping this up. What are your final words of wisdom to the audience today?
I would say step into your superpower. Move through your denial and your minimization and act. Just be aware of the science, take it seriously, create phone-free time. It will be very difficult for 2 or 3 weeks, and you will probably fall off the bus every 4 or 6 months. Then you just get back on it. No judgment. Be very picky, just like you would. People put lots of energy into decorating their homes so they feel comfy. Put energy in what you curate, what you look at on your phone. Ask yourself, is it life-sucking? Is it life-giving? And if it's life-sucking, just keep scrolling by it. And T is take it out of your bedroom. Just understand that your initial resistance is about the science of it. And that think about it. The phone is a strange bedfellow. That it is just odd to be able to have the main thing that you are embracing in bed be your phone. Try a dog.
Great. So yeah, I will be putting all of MJ's contact information wherever you're watching and listening. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and ask her the questions. And I will also be putting that podcast link in the links as well. So if you want some more information or dig even deeper into this amazing problem that we are having globally, like it's really scary. Yeah, it gives you another listen. So, well, thank you for listening today.
Can I just say one more thing?
Absolutely.
I'm really hopeful because I've done this with so many people. And that when people have information and they choose to listen to it, they make changes. I also think when I mentioned the podcast, the name of my podcast is Creating Midlife Calm. And that particular episode, I believe, is 76.
Great.
So
Wonderful. Thank you so much, MJ. So now leaving you a gentle reminder to slow down and enjoy life, and I'll see you in the next episode.